I wasn't expecting much from Knack. All I wanted was a fun little 3D platformer, a nice comfort zone for a genre that I enjoy. But what I got instead was sleep medication. I'm not even kidding, Knack is so boring that I passed out in the first hour. Let that set the theme for the rest of the review. Knack takes place in a world where well-equipped humans are at war with primitive goblins. Primitive, until they suddenly start showing up with tanks. It's up to Knack, the newest invention by Dr. Vargas, to figure out what's going on and save the day.
Most impressive, Doctor. You call it Knack, is that right?
Actually, I call myself Knack.
That would have been fine if the plot was left at that and kept simplistic, but the writers of Knack were a bit more ambitious. There are so many characters with their own backstories, and conflicts are thrown in to add some drama. However, it doesn't really work all that well because everyone is so poorly written.
Does he, ever talk about your parents?
No.
You ever wonder why the doc takes care of you instead of me?
Well, that's an easy one. You're never around.
That's true. I would make a very bad parent. Always wandering off somewhere. Lucas, you think you fight with the doc. My little sister. I mean, your mother. That was something to see. Half the time they worked together, she was telling him off about something or another. What I'm trying to say is...
Who cares? These people are not interesting enough to warrant this. Knack really needed to dial back the drama and just stick to Saturday morning cartoon style of storytelling. But no, everyone's gotta have some kind of depth to them.
Now, how long will it take us to get there?
We're going there?
Well, yes. The least we can do is to get to the key before Victor does. Don't worry, I'll be careful.
Oh, you'll be careful. That'll be the day.
The doctor is arrogant and feels the need to be constantly in charge, while his assistant Lucas acts as the voice of reason and helps keep the audience grounded. But this dynamic takes forever to get resolved, and it goes on for nearly the entire game. Everyone else, from the comic relief to the villains, are incredibly stock and do little to inspire creativity. I'll give them some credit, the writers do try to cover some interesting themes. I especially like this scene that works as commentary on how the player gets directed in video games.
Oh, it said great danger. Why don't you believe it?
The doctor does strategy. I do execution.
The last strategy of the doctors ended up with us captured and you shot. Tell me, Knack, does all of this really make sense to you?
Not so much.
But the story never carries it further than a mere mention. The train of thought is dropped right then and there, so it comes off as really shallow. Poor storytelling normally wouldn't be a big deal to me in an action-oriented game, but Knack is just cutscene after cutscene and it weighs down the game's overall quality. The visual design is excellent. There's a wide variety of environments to go through and they all look unique. Even though the game takes the player through multiple caves, mines, and factories, they all manage to have their own look and feel to them. The game's actual graphical prowess, on the other hand, is very underwhelming. It doesn't look bad by any means, but it certainly doesn't look next-gen. This would have been fine a generation ago, but even as a launch title on the PS4, it's not all that impressive to look at, and worse yet for whenever the frame rate dips. For the most part, Knack does do a good job at hiding this visually, but the controls do become noticeably sluggish whenever a lot of action is going on at once. Using Knack as a launch title exclusive to showcase the PS4's power might not have been the wisest choice. But you know what? I can get over a lame story, lackluster graphical capabilities, and even a lowered frame rate as long as the gameplay can save it. Sadly, this is, believe it or not, the worst aspect of Knack. The platforming involved is extremely basic. There is no challenge here, and Knack moves at a very slow pace, so it gets boring very quickly. The game's geometry is also awkward, and many cliff sides require a double jump at times that wouldn't make any sense for it. The engine and control scheme used don't work properly as a 3D platformer. There needs to be something like a persistent run that affects movement speed, jump height, and distance. Some kind of momentum which a lot of platformers rely on and is not found here in Knack. Hell, give me a wall jump or some other interesting movement option to work with. Or at least design the levels with meaningful obstacles. It's so pathetic that the few times when gameplay does change, like the wall climbing or air gliding sections, it's even slower and more boring than usual. The other side of the gameplay coin focuses on combat, and it doesn't fare much better. Knack has a grand total of 4 attacks, a 3-hit combo, a dive bomb, a dash attack, and his super moves. That's it. Different enemies are easier to take down with specific attacks, and they all require slightly varied tactics, but it's never enough to really engage the player. It's always a simple dance of dodge, counterattack, and repeat. It's like someone took God of War but intensely dumbed it down, even more so. The enemy variety is actually quite good, from ranged opponents to fast ones to enemies with shields and so on. But there's only a bare minimum of complexity when it comes to dealing with them all. All of this is already bad enough. It should be clear by now that this game isn't worth anyone's time. But Knack isn't one to rest on his laurels. He's got one more trick up his sleeve to go above and beyond in awfulness, and it's the camera. Even in 2013, why was this an issue? Depth perception is oftentimes unclear, and occasionally Knack's massive body will cover up the action. But here's the real kicker. The camera will just straight up fail to follow the action. There is an enemy here, and I can't see him. How was this overlooked? In certain situations, the camera works by having the enemy reorient themselves, like when this boss moves in front of the camera on purpose. But this seems like such a strange handicap to rely on. Why can't the camera just be manipulated like most other 3D platformers? Oh, but here's my favorite. In this part of the game, the enemy actually gets covered by the heads-up display. That's just beautiful. The level is designed to proceed this way too. There's no way the developers or the playtesters could have missed this. They just purposefully decided to leave it in. What's most disappointing about Knack, more than anything, is the lost potential. Knack's character revolves around his ability to absorb objects and make himself larger and more powerful, kind of like a Katamari action hero. And his abilities can change depending on the materials he absorbs. But none of it is flexible to the gameplay. It's all entirely run by the story. You don't look for materials to collect, the story places them in your way and forces you to get them. That would be okay if Knack played differently depending on his size or in what he absorbs, but no. It's exactly the same other than the fact that Big Knack has a much larger reach and is generally easier to play as. So starting off each level as Little Knack with your stubby little arms is no fun at all. It can be argued that I might be overcritical of Knack since this is a game primarily made for children. Except that's not the problem here. Kirby is a game made for children. Kirby is easy to get through and doesn't demand much from the player, but it also doesn't skimp on the gameplay. Kirby can run, jump, slide, fly, and he can absorb enemies at any time to give him new abilities and change the gameplay on the fly to keep things interesting, all while allowing the player to go at his own pace, whereas Knack forces the player to go at an incredibly slow pace. Kirby games aren't the deepest in complexity, but they're fun. Knack is slow, repetitive, and incredibly boring for the entire 10 hours that it lasts. And that was due to numerous restarts while playing on the hard difficulty. Nearly every attack at this difficulty kills Knack in one shot. But again, it's not a very complex or demanding of a game, and the super move can be used to skip whole sections entirely. An even higher difficulty is unlocked after completing the game, along with 2 new modes, and there are a bevy of hidden treasures that ever so slightly alters the gameplay. But all of these extras mean nothing when the foundation is worthless. It amazes me how low my expectations were going into this and how disappointed I was upon the end. The fact that this game got a sequel makes absolutely no sense to me. I completely wasted my time with Knack, and I beg others not to do the same, for any price, even if you're getting it for free.
But I can tell you love to destroy things. But there's plenty of that wherever I go. Come, join me.
I get big. I break things. I can't help it. But what you do, this is evil. Join you? Never!
Thank you for watching my review of Knack. If you would like to be updated on my future videos, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, follow me on Twitter, or check out my page on Critic.